Okay. Should I call you Buzz?
You can, sir.
Okay. Hello, Buzz. How are you? Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Douglas. I appreciate it.
So, you've got a book out that you're promoting, and the book is called Saving KC. And from what I'm reading through on this bio, this is a book about addiction, alcoholism. Is that correct?
In some ways, yes, of course. Really, the center of attraction, I guess you could say, is more about Karen Carpenter. It is a historical fiction novel, and it is set in the 1970s. And the premise of the book is really, if anyone remembers or recalls who Karen Carpenter was, she was the sister
Oh,
half
yeah. Yeah.
of the Carpenters. So and she died of anorexia at a very young age, and she was a very popular singer at the time. So the book is about how if Karen Carpenter would have survived, how could we have saved her? That's pretty basically it.
Oh, okay. I thought this was something completely different. All right.
Well, it does, Douglas. You're not off base. You're not off track. It does in the story. How do we save a Karen Carpenter? She suffers from obviously a fatal disease, and really that fatal disease, as I've studied it and researched it, anorexia bulimia, is has a lot of the things about alcoholism. They're very common. The behaviors are common. The treatment for that is much the same, a little different. One, you got to stop doing one, start doing another, eating food, or stop drinking alcohol, one or the other. So that's kind of where the tie-in is made.
Well, I know very well who Karen Carpenter was, and she had an amazing voice. And, some of the greatest sort of pop songs of the 70s were by the Carpenters. Very famous.
Yeah,
Um,
and if you're like me, you smuggled your albums in so no one could see you.
well, some people thought they were a little nerdy, but I enjoyed her music very much. I enjoyed listening to her voice. I could listen to her sing all day long. Um,
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you about that because I never made a comparison between anorexia and alcoholism.
Hmm.
Because, like you said, one is you have to start and one is you have to quit.
Yeah.
But with anorexia, it's an addiction not to eat food. Is that how that works?
It's a
It's a
psychological
yeah.
malady. It's typically, and I'm no expert, I'm no doctor. I just did enough research to write this book and tie things together. We as novelists, we either go in deep or we just do enough because the matter of the issue time is always at our shoulders. So we're trying to make things work. Also, at the same time, make them real and realistic so that you're not just blathering about something that has no basis in fact. So the the tie-in, usually young women who are under a lot of pressure, and obviously the film industry and the music industry has a lot of that going on. And usually people who suffer from anorexia, bulimia also have the addiction to either alcohol and or drugs because that kind of is the tie-in is actually provides somewhat of a relief to the affliction because there's physical pain involved. But in Karen Carpenter's case, that was not the case. She was just an anorexic bulimic, pure. And of course, if you recall at that time, Twiggy was very popular. And everyone, the real super thin thing was in. And of course, she had a body type that she didn't like, and she was self-conscious about it. And usually with young women, it's a lot of times it's the mother or the parents that causes all of this pressure and this desire to please and to be the good person and to do the right thing. And it's very typical with Karen Carpenter's situation. I don't want to get into besmirching her mother or parents or anything, but her mother was pretty controlling and demanded this and demanded that, even when those two kids were just young adults. She just wanted to control everything that went on in their lives. Worked to an extent, but when the money started rolling in, you couldn't use the two shoebox method to handle all of their financial affairs. So she finally had to let go of that. But behind that is that trying to please someone who the perception is by the person who is affected is that person doesn't care for them and doesn't maybe love them. And in this brother-sister situation, you had Richard was the favorite. He was the one that things were done for and the reason things were done. And she was just along for the ride until all of a sudden this beautiful voice bloomed from behind the scenes and it changed the whole dynamic. And she never really, the books I've read and research I've done, never really ever received in public or probably in private any real due recognition from her mother for her accomplishments. So that's that part of it. The cure for that, which there is no cure, just as there is for alcoholism, there is no cure for alcoholism. Oh, a lot of people would like to take credit and think they can, doctors and psychiatrists, but all they can do is really stand by and watch. There is nothing. This is why, they're very frustrated, and in the public, people really, when someone dies of a disease or dies because of alcoholism, it's never published in the obituary. Well, this guy died of alcoholism. No, he died of heart disease or kidney failure or something like that.
Or liver. Yeah.
Or that, because no one can fix them. So it's not saying we died of alcoholism. And with anorexia, what happened to Karen is the treatment at that time, no one really knew what this was. Obviously, you recall probably is when she passed away, everyone went, "What? What was that?" And then it started to kind of come out what this was. And at that time, in the things that I've studied, there was only one person that I came up with that had a treatment modality for treating anorexia and understood the psychosis behind it, and usually the mother-daughter connection, and that lack of love thing, and that demanding of perfection of oneself thing that played into it as well. And this doctor was Hildy Busch, and she was a German psychoanalyst out of Germany. She immigrated to the United States, and she was a professor at Baylor University in the early 70s, and she had developed this modality or the knowledge of what this was and how to treat it. The only one that I could ever find. And obviously, Karen found someone when Karen's circle had her hooked up with a doctor out of New York who had a very strange modality to teach, to reach, to, as he put it, cure anorexia. But he was a total failure, which contributed to her passing prematurely.
All right. Let me interrupt you here. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes, and I want to make sure we get a couple of topics in here. So why did you pick her? I mean, why did you decide to write this book? Because it says this is your debut novel.
It is.
Yeah.
It's going to be way too long of an explanation to get into in 5 minutes, but I can tell you short version.
Okay, give us the short version.
It was a very spiritual experience for me because I am not, as I said, I am not a writer, but my publisher says, "You wrote a book, you are a writer." And it was a spiritual experience. This book, as it popped into my head, happened pretty quickly. The final manuscript, the manuscript was started and done in about 3 months, the first run. And then it went to editing, which took about a year. That was basically it. It was a spiritual thing for me. For some reason, I believe this person or this, whatever this was, got to me and caused a real emotional reaction. I was so struck by this. I saw my shrink, my psychiatrist, and I said, "Is it possible to fall in love with a dead person?" She says, "No, no one's getting hurt, are they?" I said, "I don't think so." She said, "Well, I don't see any harm in this. It's a little different, but whatever." And that's kind of what happened. Is the more I researched this thing and the more I looked at it and the more I dug into it, yeah, I guess that's what you could say, is I fell in love with her.
Okay. So you were basically a fan of her music and then just decided to write a book about her. Is it sort of a memoir, or is it more focused on, not a memoir, like a biography, or is it more focused on the anorexia part of her life?
It's actually, it has a protagonist that comes from an Indian reservation in Montana, and that's where I'm from. And so that's kind of how it goes from there. I think it's a fun read for most people. It's a romantic novel in many ways. It touches on the scene of war. It touches on that thing. But I have to build this up in order to make it work. One of the early tips that I got was a reading from Stephen King that I picked up, a tip that he gave, is he takes two totally dissimilar things and mashes them together and looks for the contrast. And that's kind of what I did here. And things started popping out, which created the storyline.
All right. Has the book been released?
It is on re-release. In fact, just this past week, the hardcover version is available. I was down at the pre-Emmy Awards down in LA last week, signing copies and putting them in gift bags for the stars. So it was quite an interesting event.
Are you getting reviews on it?
I have several reviews on the first publication that was done in 2022. And again, it was republished because I had a little bit of a bad experience with a publicist that just did not go well. So we changed the ending actually and then republished it.
Okay. This sounds like it'd make an interesting movie.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would like to see, but movie deals, they're kind of odd because they'll take your story, gut it like a fish,
That's true.
Sew it up, and then hope it swims.
Yeah.
And it's never the same thing that you originally came up with.
Well, that's very
which
true.
is unfortunate.
Well, okay, Buzz, on that, I think we're going to have to wind this down. Thank you so much for coming on. Last question, do you have a website for yourself or for the book?
Yes, it's Saving KC, initial K, initial C, thestory.com.
All right. Well, again, thank you for coming on. Nice meeting you and chatting with you. Best of luck with the book.
Thank you, Douglas. Appreciate it.